When you see a company that has fallen so hard to the brink of censoring its own customers, you know they are not going to take responsibility for their own failure. So the easy option is to make people fall in line and shut their own mouths and eat the slop like a good little child. But as we have seen time and time again, history repeats itself, like someone who thinks they're bad but end up getting a can of whoop ass served cold. Now Square Enix is literally begging for it now. Again, another prediction I got right from last year. So without further ado, hi, I'm Wilksy and let's dive into this stupidity. And if you want to support me further, subscribe and take a look at my socials in the description below, and let's make a kingdom.
Assemble the army!
So it seems Square Enix can no longer take the heat of criticisms from fans and its failures from the games it has created and its expansions. So what is the cause of this new policy that they have now implemented? Well, it was due to Final Fantasy XIV fans absolutely disliking and trashing the Dawn Trail expansion due to a character called Wilksy. Why, you might ask? Well, to put it in more simple terms, this is a side character that has now all of a sudden become the main character, not you, the hero of light. Not only that, she was written in a comic relief and annoying character upon a very serious story. But of course, Square Enix of the West and Twitter X activists who have been criticised blame this all on transphobia, as of course the voice actor in the West is trans. No surprise there, as I always love to use them as shields. I haven't played Final Fantasy XIV Dawn Trail myself, so I know nothing about the story, but if the entire Japan fanbase, along with others in the West, hated this expansion altogether, you know that Square Enix have done an absolutely shitty move entirely.
There! A rift in her reality! She's losing control of the power! Spain! Listen to me! I understand! I do! And I know that you won't be swayed from your course! But if there's truly no other way to resolve this, then face me! Not
Love my children. To all of my children, to whom death has
Like I said, I haven't played the expansion, but there is a YouTuber by the name of Zepla HQ who goes into full depth why this expansion failed so hard. I recommend to watch her deep dive analysis because I'm glad other gamers are starting to see the patterns of bad story writing in modern games of today.
Which leads us into the most obvious problem with how Wilksy was used in the story. She far surpasses every other character, both in number of words spoken and the number of times you need to speak with her as an objective. It is to a degree that is simply unacceptable. I myself felt highly fatigued. Although I enjoyed her presence for the first couple zones, over time I felt smothered. A person I utterly failed to connect with, who seemed ever-present and unchanging, a fact of life, a condition, a background, a foreground. Every quest led back to her and every character sounded like her. When I closed my eyes, I could see her face. I'm serious. I escaped her in Zone 4. She became Dawn Servant and I thought I was free. But what a fool I was! There was a time I was with a new character, Otis, and I'm enjoying this guy. And a precious brief moment away from her, she shows up and interrupts to say, "Hey, this looks like fun. Can I join in?" Aaronville has a sad moment with his mom. She interrupts to say, "Looks like we're having fun." When Kona asks for a moment in private, she interrupts to invite herself along. Of course, there is also the last boss. Some of the most fun I had in the whole expansion. A boss who calls you the most dangerous threat to her plans. But at about 35% of the boss's HP, Wilksy actually tears through reality to interrupt the fight and take center stage once again. I actually laughed my ass off when this happened because I could not fathom the absurdity of this decision. The plot put so much unnecessary attention on Wilksy that she became a lightning rod for player dissatisfaction with the story. I often felt disconnected from characters I love as they just weren't behaving like themselves. They weren't saying or doing anything offensive or anything wildly beyond the pale. It was just very bland, very safe, and worst of all, out of character. Many times it's just people listing off their respective tasks or who they'd pair up with in the next activity, so we all split off and then we repeat it again the next time. As for me and my bunny girl, I never felt less free than I did in Dawn Trail, being forced into choices and obligations that didn't feel natural to me at all. But not only that, feeling inept in moments where it didn't make sense for me to be there standing helplessly. Galul Jaja dying and Sphene doing her villain monologue. We know she's about to kill everyone and nobody tries anything. Yes, Emmett Selk did villain monologues, but they made sure every character couldn't just attack him. Like after he shot the Exarch, he immediately said, "Don't attack me or your Exarch friend is dead." He held the Exarch hostage throughout that whole thing, so it made sense why nobody attacked him. Give a reason why characters can't do anything.
I won't steal any more of her thunder, but I'll put a link in the description to her video below. Yep, everything is bland, safe, boring, while adding a character that will never give you any breathing room to discover more, and choices are made for you. Man, it's like Dragon Age to Veilguard, just minus the struggle session seminars, but an added in Dora the Explorer kind of story, as it's just so repetitive. And this is evidence why the player count for Final Fantasy XIV dropped so fast below 1 million, and no one trusts Square Enix no more with the next expansion. But might I digress? This is what happens when you hire people who are far below mediocre to write the story, characters and even music, while taking your fan base for granted. But also, let's not forget the failure of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth and Final Fantasy XVI. As to this day, Square Enix have still not made a profit from those games either. I could tell you where it all went wrong with both those games. Final Fantasy VII Rebirth had censored Tifa's silhouette as well as her bazungas. Even though you are a trained martial artist, you would have a body like that. Cid's own Rocket Town no longer exists, meaning he could not be abusive to Shera when you first met him. He's not foul-mouthed and no longer has a cigarette box or smoking one either, because we can't have reality in this mommy-cuddled video gaming world. But last, but no means least, when looking at the game entirely, it now looks like a Disney Western game than a very serious Japanese one. I played Final Fantasy Remake and finished it, but I hated it for two reasons. One, Sephiroth was in it way too much. The Whispers again looks like something from Kingdom Hearts, and when we get multiverses, again the Japanese immersion has been eroded. Plus the creators and writers are now saying we can make shit up as we go along, we don't have a well established story. Sephiroth was more evil and badass when you didn't see him, but seeing the devastation they have caused made the party and the player feel powerless all the time, until you finally meet him face to face at the Northern Cave and see the full extension of his powers. And number two, in Rebirth, you're supposed to be on the run from Shinra, you're wanted fugitives, so if people know exactly where you're going, especially when it came to the Golden Saucer, and even Shinra tried to make a deal with you. So no, this is not the Final Fantasy VII I loved and cherished when I first played it. Final Fantasy 16, again, the story was not interesting and the writing was just horrible. The graphics and the world of Final Fantasy 16 looks awesome, but I didn't complete it in the end as it was just too boring. Just those games alone show how much they have fallen. But now, let's take a look at the policy and go through it. Policy for responding to customer harassment. If the group determines that a customer has engaged in customer harassment against an officer or employee of the company that exceeds the scope of socially accepted norms, the group may suspend the provision of customer service or the provision of the group's products and services. In addition, if the act is malicious, we may take measures including legal action or criminal proceedings after consulting with the police or lawyers. Acts that the group assumes as acts of customer harassment that exceed the scope of social accepted norms include, but are not limited to, the following acts. The moment that I hear assumes as acts of customer harassment and the scope of socially accepted norms, this policy has been done by people who don't want to face the real world and want things to be mommy-cuddled, just like the westernized rainbow cult, meaning you can't agree to disagree and you have to bend to their whims to make them feel safe, like an 8-year-old in a 30-year-old's body. Let's go further. Harassment, violent acts, violent behaviour. That's fair, as that's a crime and that's going way too far. Verbal abuse, intimidation, coercion, excessive pursuit or reprimand, defamation, such as defamation and insult, denial of personality, personal attacks, including emails, contact via inquiry forms, comments and posts on the internet, threats of harm, threats of obstruction of business, relentless inquiries, repeated, visiting or sitting in offices or related facilities without permission, prolonged detention, including phone calls and inquiries, discriminatory words or actions based on race, ethnicity, religion, family origin, occupation, etc. Infringement of portrait rights and privacy, such as unauthorized photography and video recording, sexual harassment, stalking, unreasonable demands, unreasonable changes or exchanges of goods or requests for monetary compensation, unreasonable responses or requests for an apology, including face-to-face correspondence or requests for an apology that identifies the position, requests for provision of excessive products and services that exceed the scope of social accepted norms, demands for unreasonable and excessive punishment against the company officers and employees, etc. Now, stalking and going into establishments without permission and personally attacking employees, fair enough, because that is going way too far about a video game. But as soon as we get to verbal abuse from emails, comments and posts on the internet and demanding apologies is apparently now harassment, that's where we enter the grounds of censorship and thought crimes. Again, what are these people? 8-year-olds? All I can say is welcome to the internet and welcome upon being a very big established company that people will criticize you upon everything that you can't avoid, from what you say and what products that you make. Now, I can understand the Japanese doing the employee safety thing after the incidents with J-pop idols who have been attacked by people, like the AKB48 incident. But again, censoring your customers and holding their accounts to ransom is a line that should not be crossed. I don't care what background, country or tradition someone's from. Censorship is for pussies. Now, why is Square Enix doing this? Well, they're in financial quicksand right now as their stocks have plummeted over 10% since November 2024, and now investors seem to be skeptical about its near-term prospects. Of course, let's not forget listening to Black Girl Gamers upon making Forspoken, a game no one wanted. The story and the character itself was obnoxious, boring, that led to a video game studio closing down altogether. So as history repeats itself, when a company fails so hard and it doesn't want to listen and admit to their own mistakes and correct them, knowing getting their pride and financial stability is going to take years, they would rather want to take the easy path by silencing people. But it then turns into a war that they want to proclaim they are the grand arbiters of what is right, and everybody else who criticise or even slights them deserve punishment of not being able to buy their products or hold their accounts to ransom. Where's the sense in that, you might ask, after what they're going through right now? As we said, desperate and highly anxious people will always make the most stupid decisions, and like in my previous videos, it becomes, I can do anything because I am entitled to. And as soon as they believe this, nothing is going to stop them. And let's not forget, gamers, Sega done the same thing as well. When gamers heavily criticised Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth when New Game Plus was now a paywall DLC, and they chose to side with activist localizers, and Riot Games recently did the same as well when it comes to playing League of Legends. But don't worry, there are many more to come in 2025, as this will be the year when video game studios or a few companies will collapse within themselves. Because, as they say, owning the chuds or far right wingers they have labelled anyone who criticises them is more important than making money, and having that kind of attitude is where they're caught and trapped in the death spiral. Because the one thing that hinders weak humans is owning up to their mistakes and facing the tribulations head on, making themselves better individuals and back on the right path. Hence why DEI is a strong doctrine, as they don't want to admit they have been conned. There is nothing wrong in admitting to one's mistakes, but if one is willing to make things better and become a strong individual, you'll be remembered and looked up to as the person that people should learn from. And if anyone can do it, then what's everybody else's excuse? Hence, facing problems head on is the con artists or activists' kryptonite. I actually liked Square Enix or Squaresoft in the past for its games of old, from their storytelling, character designs and music that brings the entire experience to life. Final Fantasy was the game that literally saved the company from bankruptcy, because Hironobu Sakaguchi saw and listened to the Western market after the release of Ultima 1 Wizardry and, of course, Dungeons & Dragons. At first, he was rejected because Square thought it would lose them money, but when Dragon Quest 1 was released and was a smash hit in Japan, and they were going for the jugular in the American market, they then told Sakaguchi to make the game as quick as possible before Enix made their sequel. You see, Square listened to the market and they listened to Western gamers, and it saved them. But unfortunately, those days are over. Hence why I saw this coming a long time ago, after failure upon failure, as well as those being indoctrinated with the poisonous DEI religion in between, and not wanting to admit they have been conned. Lines had been crossed, customer relations have been severed. All I can say is, to gamers out there, if you want to show you have value, that a company doesn't own you, let alone you owe them nothing, don't buy their products no longer, as at the end of the day, they are now desperate bullies. They need us more than we need them. They don't get to claim authority over another human being's life, let alone speech. They don't get to visit their bad judgments onto other people. And just like Ubisoft, we are not all in the same boat. They are the ones that will get torpedoed by its fan base. My final message to Square Enix is, I think you all need to play the very game you created, called Final Fantasy IV, when it came to Cecil Harvey's hero progression, because after all the bloodshed he had caused and being blindly loyal to his once adoptive father and not questioning motives is what made him weak and naive. But after the incident at the town of Mist and being all alone in Mysidia with his tail between his legs, he then had the courage to go back to the village he once attacked, asking for repentance and for once in his life asking for guidance. The elder told him to go to Mount Ordeals in order to face his dark self, because for Cecil to become strong, he needed to face his past and let go of it, in order to become a beacon of light and hope, a paladin. That's what made Cecil become a well-grounded human being and the hero of the story. So let's see if Square Enix are willing to listen to their customers, or they want to carry on going blindly into the death precipice. This is Wilksy 15, signing out.